Welcome to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Sweet. Breathe, eat, sleep, thrive in every aspect of your life. What does thriving actually mean? Thriving is not a word, it's an action, a way of living. And that's what the Best Living Show is all about. So get ready, step into a new narrative, and find a new way of being. There's a beautiful connection, a spark that flies at the intersection between the genetic code and your internal guidance system. We're going to throw away the culture that would tell us that thriving is something only for a few. Every one of us is unique. It's our time to discover why. The Best Living Show starts now. Hello, and welcome to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Sweet, and we are going to have a very interesting show today. We are going to be talking all about Kundalini breathwork and Kundalini yoga. This is something that I don't really know a lot about. I've done a few sessions and done a little research on it, but I'm hoping that as we move through the hour, my guest, C. McDermott, will speak to this. She is a Kundalini yoga teacher. She also holds a PhD in integrative nutrition. She's a certified cognitive health specialist, a behavioral change specialist, certified functional nutritional coach. She was also an author of the book, Your DNA, Your Life. So she is also a genetic coach, just like me. But her certifications and her titles don't compare to the real world experience that she has gathered throughout her life. And I know I have a little window into some of the stories of C's back life, her old life. She used to work for the government. And so there's some real world experience there that comes into all of this. But she has really taken a lot of education. She stays up to date with all the latest research. And her quest is really to inspire and guide others to their limitless potential. And so welcome to the show, C. McDermott.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
Yeah, so obviously, as I said, you're a Kundalini yoga teacher. And one of my reasons that I wanted to talk about Kundalini yoga was because of the breath work. One of the things for me is how important the breath is to our life, how it is to our metabolism, pretty much the whole body system. And obviously, I always say if we couldn't breathe, there would be no life, right? So what people don't understand, though, is that through our lifestyles, which, have become very sedentary, very indoors, some of the dietary things that we choose to eat, our breath has changed. And I feel like, one of the things that Kundalini really focuses on is that breath work. But let's back up. Let's have a little definition of what Kundalini yoga is. I mean, a lot of people have done yoga, right? There's so many different types out there. They've probably done the downward dog and the warrior pose and all that. But I know, having done a couple of sessions of Kundalini with you, this is something completely different. So give us a little explanation of what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. So Kundalini yoga is the yoga of awareness. So it's definitely unlike many of the yogas you find in the West. There is no vinyasa flow. There could be a downward dog every now and then, but sometimes the downward dog takes place on your fingertips and the tips of your toes. But there's not a flow. Some of the poses can be held for a very long period of time, and sometimes they can be very repetitive movements. So sometimes they're more like, somewhere between 3 to 11 minutes, 22 minutes long for a certain pose. And sometimes the Kriyas are just one pose, and sometimes they're like 16 poses, like we're used to many different movements, but it doesn't really flow in the traditional sense that we would, as a teacher, then use like the art of building a class. All the classes there's about 8,000 Kriyas, and they're all already pre-made. So there's a little less creativity in the sense of organizing the Kriyas, but it's very focused on the breath and the awareness of the breath. So you really come into the breath, and it allows you to really take control of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor in a greater sense than many other of the less pranic heavy yoga. So more of like a movement yoga that doesn't focus on that pranayama and the breath. Um, this does incorporate a lot of mantra. So there's a fair amount of chanting. And then again, those poses are held a little longer. And the preparation of moving the body is really just to prepare for meditation. So the kind of the main event is the meditation. And those range anywhere from like 1 minute to 2.5 hours. So it's a very different style from a lot of Western yogas that people would know. And it's, people like to say that it's anyone can do Kundalini yoga, but it's not for everyone. So
Right. Yeah. No, I know. And having experienced it, it is different. And some of the poses are very different. Because as you said, sometimes you're chanting and very rhythmic breathing. And you're holding that pose for quite a while, and some of them are not the most comfortable. Or that you might have your legs in the air, like I did one time and went over backwards. So it is something different than I've experienced before. But so I mean, really, my understanding though is that there's a lot of energy that is created within those poses, and it's kind of like the idea of expanding consciousness, and also that spiritual awakening as well is involved in that.
hmm So a lot of people focus on some yogas focus on chakras.
Mm-hmm.
In Kundalini, we have 7, or excuse me, 8 chakras, because we have the known 7 chakras that are often referred to in traditional yoga, and then the aura is the 8th chakra.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, so it's a little different. However, the idea of Kundalini awakening is kind of like a controversial topic for many people. So I think that has scared people off from Kundalini. And there's like this idea that I think for a while, if you Googled Kundalini yoga, it said the first thing on the drop down was, is Kundalini yoga dangerous? So I would say, in fact, that in like gym yoga, I'll call it, which is literally just performed in a gym, which would just be a movement-based yoga. It has no lifestyle basis to it per se, although you may find wonderful practitioners teaching at gym classes, but more or less like a yoga you'd find at your YMCA.
Right.
Would actually, people really often injure themselves more often, and I would say that those are more dangerous if they are taught incorrectly, or if people try more advanced poses. So it's less about those Instagrammable poses, because most of them are not that pretty, right? So we do a lot of movements where the arms are held up, out in front of you,
in the air, right?
side,
Like, I remember
air.
like having to hold my hands in the air for a long time. Thinking, when is this gonna end?
Yeah, so sometimes we move the arms and sometimes they're held. It depends on the kriya. So they're often held for 11 minutes up in the air, and I'm pretty sure that's the one that you and I did that time.
Yeah.
So there, we do work with the arms a lot, because the lymph under the arm and kind of in the breast tissue area for women is really helpful. Just to move lymph anyway. And we do, the idea in Ayurvedic tradition would be that like the underarm is to be moved so that you can move lymph and, like actually keep movement going in the body. And that is supposed to be disease preventing.
Right. Yeah, that, I mean, totally makes sense. And really, a lot of the poses that you're doing, you are building tone and strengthening as you do them, right? Because you do have to hold them and for quite a while, and even sometimes you're crouched as well as holding your arms up, and so it's really, I felt like it was really, not only was I working on, kind of moving all of these things in my body, but also some of that core work.
Yeah, and there's
right?
there's a lot of like people will say you have like Kundalini shoulders, like you get like jacked shoulders from holding your arms up a lot. So
Well, the thing is, though, as you said, like people Google and it's like, oh, is this dangerous? Or maybe, they might think, okay, like, it's all this mantras and chanting. I don't know about this. But there's actually a lot of research on Kundalini that shows, there's studies showing stress reduction. When after practicing yoga, the Kundalini yoga for like 8 weeks, it really showed an improvement in psychological well-being. It really was it found a positive effect on anxiety, depression. In another study, I found one on cognitive function, that it improved cognitive function, memory, attention in older adults, even with a mild cognitive impairment. That was, really looking at Alzheimer's and memory disease. And then even emotional regulation. So, again, 12 weeks leading to resilience, self-compassion, helping with chronic insomnia. So, people might think like, oh, I don't know about this, but it's really got some science behind it, showing how much it helps not only with cognitive function, cardiovascular function, obviously because of the breath work, right? But also just health and well-being in general, anxiety and those kind of things.
Yeah, and I think it helps a lot. I mean, in addition to the many benefits you just listed, one of the great things I love is that it kind of improves posture, and it allows that diaphragmatic breathing to take place more often than just on the mat. So you'll find yourself with kind of a better posture throughout, which makes a big difference because, we tend to slouch. We tend to like push our necks forward because we're looking at phones and computer screens, and we're kind of leaning forward throughout the day.
Yeah.
I know, like, I'm a remote
Like,
worker, right? So I'm constantly on my computer.
Yeah.
And yeah, it makes a big difference in how we sit and how we hold our shoulders. And then that diaphragmatic breathing really allows just more control and more tone of the diaphragm, and it allows you to take control. So it's interesting because you can find specific kriyas for what you're kind of working on. So if someone's looking for, some improved breathing, there's the specific kriya that you could do. And, the yogis would recommend to do it for, 11 days or maybe like 1,000 days, depending somewhere in between. But that would really focus on just taking control of that diaphragm. So that's a really useful one. And the one that you mentioned with cognitive decline is that adults with early dementia signs did slow or reverse their symptoms with, it was just one kriya in particular, and it's actually just a mantra that you place your thumb on a fingertip, and you have a mantra that goes with it as you go through. And it's 11 minutes a day, and they did it for, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 8 weeks to begin, and there was a significant difference. And it's the most studied of like when you see a meditation study, it's often that meditation, and that's the most studied one because I think they kind of put it out there because it's the most effective. So that one's really exciting to see. And presuming, we can't draw that from the research per se, but we can presume that, not only are we reversing it in older age, but if you're younger, you certainly benefit from it now. One of the things I find funny is that we always come back to like, oh, well, the science tells us this. And as kind of like a citizen scientist, I always like to know, and I want to be able to tell my clients. And it's kind of funny with yoga because we can do all the research we want, but like 3,000 years of tradition would probably tell us it works, right?
Yeah, I know.
But it is nice to vet. And now we have science to vet that. And it is really interesting to see what and reasonings and like what was written about a certain kriya so long ago that is now like, oh, wow, that makes total sense. And that's exactly where we are as a culture. So like there's kriyas for, when times become dark and like, like kind of this different age for the information age, essentially. So very cool.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, what you're saying is so right. This is something that's been around for thousands of years. People have been using this, and but as you say, now that science is that, let's have a look at this, and in the last 10 years really validated that this is something that is very helpful. I think it just helps people understand that something might be different. It may not be kind of what you feel is norm or whatever, but that this is something that does benefit you to practice because of what it can do for you. And as you said, sometimes what we're doing is we're developing that practice now for what it can do for us in the future, right? So as you said, it will maybe, we don't have cognitive decline, and thank God. And, but it might put that off for a little bit longer if we're practicing something like this, especially with breath work in it. I don't know the creeds like you do at all, of course. But my thought was, as you were speaking about, shoulders coming back and opening up, obviously the chest and allowing for more breath, it kind of made sense to me that, perhaps that's opening up, the airways opening up, we're getting more oxygen flowing to the brain. So therefore, we're obviously innervating the brain more, right? Because there's that flow there, and that would help. I mean, that makes sense to me.
Absolutely. And there's a vagus nerve stimulation in that study as well.
Okay.
And the vagus nerve is stimulated by many different mechanisms. And one of the more interesting ones that I learned recently when I was trying to kind of gather information about Kundalini as far as actual scientific information for this very reason. Yeah, you can actually practice it now. So you can place your tongue, the tip of your tongue, behind the front teeth. It's really weird. And you often do this while at the end of a meditation. So you'll inhale at the end of a meditation, and you just press the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth. And this, in the yogic tradition, stimulates the meridians in the roof of the mouth. So in Kundalini, they say the roof of the mouth is like this celestial sky, so that all of these meridians run through, and it's almost like the constellation on the roof of your mouth. Because
so interesting.
But now we know that the roof of the mouth is actually stimulating to the pituitary gland.
Right. Yeah.
So it's very funny that now we know that it actually does stimulate the vagus nerve, because we've been doing this for, well, I haven't, but the golden chain of lineage and Kundalini yoga is what we discuss when we talk about the golden chain of teachers. And yeah, we've been doing this for thousands of years. And now we have the science to say, oh, the pituitary gland, that's what we're talking about. Okay. And then, oh, we're stimulating the vagus nerve, which if your audience is familiar with the vagus nerve, it's, it's the longest nerve in the body, but it's essentially gets you out of fight or flight, right? I mean, in short.
Right. And I think that's great, because what I want to talk about, we're going to take a short break here for a minute or so. But what I want to do when we come back is actually talk about how the breath work within Kundalini. So I want to talk about a couple of different things. There's the breath of, I think it's the breath of fire, right? I think I've done that with you. And then I think alternate nostril breathing is another one that you use, because I know that's something that's also used in other practices. So I want to talk about that a little bit, but then also how these breath practices affect the autonomic nervous system. So that people can understand really how we are helping our nervous system with these techniques. So we'll take a short break right now, and then we'll come back with more lovely information about Kundalini yoga, and talk a little bit more with C. We'll see you in a moment. Hello, and welcome to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachelle Sweet. We are back from a short break. We've been talking with C all about Kundalini yoga, and we're going to talk about breath now and the breathing, a little bit about the breath of fire, and then how that affects the autonomic nervous system. But before we do that, C, let people know who are listening, how can they find out more about you? Where can they reach you if they want to understand more about Kundalini yoga and a little bit more about you?
Yeah. The best place to find me is my website. It's cmcdermott.com. My first name is CEE. And then you can Google me.
And then
it's almost just easier to Google people now, right?
Yeah, Google. But you're also on Insight Timer as well, right? I think doing.
Yeah. So I do meditations on Monday mornings. And yeah, I usually have, I don't know, maybe 60 or 80 people join me on Monday mornings at 6 a.m. I will take a little break this summer because I'm going to be on European time for about a month, but otherwise yeah, pop on Monday mornings, and we just do 30 minutes of, most of the time we do breathing. Sometimes we do mantra, but it's really fun and it's free. And it's a really nice app that's been around. And I know like there's other meditation apps out there. But what I like about Insight is that they've always had a really great vision, and they actually have, I think it's less, honestly, it's probably a little smaller in the US, but yeah, they have 21 million meditators. So, it's not
Oh,
quite
wow.
as jazzy as some of the like startup meditation type of things, but
Right,
you can find live classes. They do have yoga classes. I actually, every now and then I'll drop in for a Kundalini class on there, but time doesn't usually allow. But Insight Timer, and they don't pay me to say this, I just really like them. And what I like is, before it was the law, they always would email you and say, hey, if you have a premium subscription, which is super cheap, it's like $20. And they would say, we just want to make sure you know that your subscription's coming up. So if you don't want it, tell us. And like, they didn't just like automatically charge you, which I always thought was so nice and really
that sounds great.
genuine and authentic. And I liked that. So that's why that's why I jumped on board with them years ago. And
you don't often find companies like that.
yeah, so they
like,
were yeah, in alignment with the actual idea. So yeah, and they have a bunch of other cool practitioners on there, meditation music. So if you're new to meditation, you want to like check out some more guided meditations, you can always find anyone on there, because again, there's like thousands of teachers, and I know there's some big names. One of my favorites, Russell Brand, is on there, and a few other like big celebs kind of jumped on board because it's a cool company. So yeah,
oh, that's cool.
Check it out.
Yeah. So if you want to do a meditation with C, 6 a.m. Monday, there you go. All right. So I mentioned before we went to the break about a commonly practiced breathwork technique called breath of fire. And I know that we've done this one before. It's very fast, kind of rhythmic breathing. Can you tell us a little bit about like kind of what's the idea behind that breath of fire?
Should we try it first?
Oh, we can try it.
Okay. So you'll just sit up if you can, if you're seated. And the idea is, now there's a lot of different ways to teach it. And some yogic practitioners may have heard of Kapalabhati breathing, which would be moving the belly to start the breath. And this is actually not what breath of fire is, although it is often taught that way in some traditions. But breath of fire is just an equal and inhale and exhale through the nose. So the way I originally was taught it was that you focus on the exhale, which is false. You actually just focus on keeping the breath even in and out through the nose. It's probably not going to sound great on microphone, but it just sounds something like this. So the belly will begin to move, some more than others, just depending on the body. And yeah, it's not a very labored breath, and you should feel like you could do it for 31 minutes, because you should, and it's awesome. But I would start with 3. Just don't jump right into 30. But yeah, just 3 minutes a day. I mean, I prefer like an 11-minute meditation every now and then, many days if possible. It really just regulates the nervous system, and there's so many benefits to it, but if you just give it a try, I think, like a lot of things in Kundalini, I feel like maybe it's not even people being almost like secretive or coy about it. I think it's just one of those things you have to try, and then you get it. Like I went to a retreat last year, and I actually went with my husband, who practices with me every day. And he was kind of like skeptical about going to a retreat, because he's been more like inside the house with his Kundalini and less out in, he hasn't been to a teacher training or anything. And the teacher said, I don't know why, I don't know what it is, but it just works. And he was like, that's it. That's the reason. So, so yeah, it's one of those things. If you give the breath of fire a shot, you might find it like really quite pleasant. And it sounds, I know if you hear it, you're like, that sounds very labored and kind of annoying. And it's not. It feels very soothing, and it's it lets you have control over the breath.
And then the other one that I think is quite is quite used a lot, right, is the alternate nostril breathing. And I know people use this in other modalities of meditation and I think even Qigong and things like that. So, I mean, literally you're using your thumb, yeah, to over your, there you
Yeah,
go.
so most of the time you'll use your thumb to block one of the nostrils and you'll breathe in and out. Sometimes you might switch nostrils, depending on the meditation or the breath work. And then sometimes you do breath of fire with the alternate nostrils, which is kind of interesting too. But the idea behind the nostrils is that essentially we'd call it like the moon energy, the feminine energy, kind of like the nighttime breathing would be through the left nostril. And you can try even just blocking the right nostril before bed. Obviously, I'm blocking my nostril, if you can hear. And you would just block it with your thumb, and the rest of your hand can kind of hang out, and you would just breathe solely through the left nostril. If you wanted more of a balance and you were kind of in a state of turmoil or like just an emotional state, or you're feeling reactive, you could inhale through one nostril and exhale through the other, and then inhale through the right nostril and exhale through the left. So you would switch sides, and then we're kind of bring you more into balance. That would be like a great middle of the day practice. And then a great morning practice would be to block the left nostril and kind of wake up. So that sun energy, the more masculine energy, the more like get it done energy would be on the right nostril. So this is why a lot of times I know in our genetic practices, I often have mentioned sleeping on the right side. And it's better for digestion, but also it turns out that it keeps the breathing. So essentially, no matter whether you're congested or not, your nostrils kind of drain to one side, which it doesn't sound very pretty, but it is like your sinuses kind of like go to the side. So if you're sleeping on the right side,
right,
kind of opens up that left nostril, allows you to get that nighttime breath that you would prefer. And then if you sleep on the other side, then, is there a huge difference? Maybe not in our like hustle and bustle world, but there might be a little nuance. If you pay very close attention, you're super tuned in. Maybe it makes that 1% difference. So I guess it's worth a try.
I think it also affects the brain with the lymphatic system and the cleaning as well, like sleeping on your side. So there's multifacets to sleeping on your side, not only digestion, breathing, but also for cleaning of the brain.
That lymphatic system.
That lymphatic system, yeah. So basically the techniques, either way, you're really looking at kind of harmonizing the brain, bringing clarity, but also calming the nervous system down, which is where
we're really getting. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so that's where we're getting to that kind of autonomic nervous system, and obviously we have the two sides, parasympathetic and sympathetic. And so tell us a little bit about kind of how that all works with Kundalini yoga and
yes. So one of the ideas is to kind of get out of the reptilian brain, and we actually
the lizard brain.
So we get to that more evolved brain, the frontal lobe, right? This is where our personality lies, but it's also where like we make a lot of decisions. So you'll find that you stimulate a lot of maybe arm movement or a lot of breath. And then maybe you have a pose in baby pose, which is similar to like a child's pose, where you would focus on having the forehead onto your mat. And this is said to like allow kind of more frontal lobe stimulation. Again, this is what yogis think, not necessarily like medical advice, but we can say these are what the Kriyas do. And I think nowadays, I think people get really caught up in saying like, well, I can't say this because it's not necessarily like medically proven, but I go ahead and say it in my classes, like you're stimulating the frontal lobe. It is what it is. So you're looking at the tip of the nose in many of the meditations, and your eyes are partially open or just 9/10 closed, and you're looking at the tip of the nose. This is supposed to stimulate the frontal lobe and the pineal gland. So it really allows you to get into that state of kind of like almost a trance, and really we never really use the word hypnotic or hypnosis, but you will find that you get into that meditative state much faster with Kundalini. Kundalini works very quickly. And it's kind of like a lot of people call it Kundalini science. The science of Kundalini, like it's a technology. Take that for what it is. But it really just works so quickly that again, like you kind of have to almost try it out to know. And I don't mean to be coy, but it allows you to get into a state that really just allows you to have a little more self-compassion, a little more compassion for all humans. And yeah, I mean, you can reach totally cosmic states in that way. So, and all before 5 a.m.
Right, yeah. So now you've talked about Kundalini as the yogas and the breath work really is a way to get into that meditation mode. So are there two different things that you practice, or does one flow to the other? Because I know the couple of times I've done the Kundalini with you is like very active, like different poses, different breathing, and not so much lying and kind of contemplating life. So is that different aspects to it, or how does that?
So it's just whatever Kriya you're working on. But yeah, a lot of the movement would take place first. Meditation comes like at the end. So sometimes that meditation is only 3 minutes, and sometimes the meditation is super active. Sometimes it is the breath. Often it is. And then there is still a shavasana in many of the kriyas where you lie, that corpse pose that a lot of people may be familiar with. That often comes at the end of yoga, that you may have done before, but in Kundalini, we do that kind of in the middle if we're doing it. And then we get to the meditation. So that's when you get to the good stuff. But that's generally seated. So most of it's seated, you kind of just hang out and then that breathing takes place, or, mantra or whatever it may be. And oftentimes it is silent. And then one of the really great breaths that I like, that really allows you to have a lot more control over your entire nervous system is called 1 minute breath. So the end goal breath mastery would be 20 seconds inhale, 20 seconds hold, and 20 seconds exhale. So that would be 1 minute. It's, you have to count in your head. But that, if you've never done something like that before, you can start with 5 seconds, but just make sure that they're even. So you do 5 seconds inhale, 5 seconds hold, 5 seconds exhale. And it's quite transformative. And you can add a few seconds throughout the practice in just 3 minutes or, 5 minutes a day. And you'll find that your lung capacity will increase pretty greatly without a lot of physical stress. But sometimes, you'll see people doing 1 minute breath and they'll be sweating, which is kind of a strange thing. And that's where, again, we are challenging the nervous system. So one of the things with breath holds is really challenging that nervous system so that you're inhaling on the hold. And then sometimes the exhale on the hold is far more challenging for most individuals. So you kind of have that breath hold out, and it's really like lack of air, right? So it just takes your body to kind of a state where it thinks that there's a problem, and then you're able to train the body. So in that sense, because we challenge the nervous system, I think as a practitioner, and as a teacher of Kundalini, that not everyone should be doing Kundalini because it can be very stressful in the body. So just like any good stress, with a hermetic stress, right? Like we go in a sauna to stress ourselves, but if you're super fatigued and you have like a chronic illness, like sauna is probably not the place to start. Kundalini might not be the place to start either. You'll find most teachers probably won't tell you that, but that's my personal opinion on that. A lot of people will say those are the people that need Kundalini the most. So it depends on who you talk to. But I think just being able to come to that meditation that, I used to always tell people like, oh, just start with 3 minutes, start with 3 minutes of meditation. That's all you need. And I disagree with that now. I disagree with my previous statements. where I think you really need to be able to meditate for like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes to really reach that state and understand what you're here on earth to do.
Right, right.
And
Yeah,
then it makes more sense. And
yeah.
then, and I'm not saying like there's any like kind of wall to pass or anything. It just suddenly seems to make more sense, like why we meditate if you can
Mhm.
meditate for 90 minutes, 2.5 hours, and then you can come back in and then you can drop in for a 5-minute meditation and just feel it so much
Right,
more, if
right.
that makes sense.
I think, yeah, I think, really though, there's a progression, right? Because you were saying, oh yeah, like do whatever you can for a few minutes. And I think when people have no concept of meditation or what to do, like that's great. And there, as you said, there's a lot of apps out there that people can do. And a lot of people say, oh, I can't switch my mind off and all that. And well, that's not the point,
Hmm.
right? The point is to start the process of bringing that nervous system down, and then as you said, with this particular type of meditation, challenging it, because with the breath work and the movement, you're challenging your body, you're challenging your nervous system, but it creates well, it's improving your brain, right? As we said, you said, okay, there's not the research, but we know whenever you do anything novel, you're affecting the plasticity of the brain and growing neural connections. So I can understand what you're saying, that the more that you do this, the more connections you're going to make in the brain, the more you're oxygenating the brain, and then obviously getting more of that mental clarity. You're bringing in that emotional regulation, right? Becoming more resilient. So then that allows you to open up to what possibilities might be out there. But I think it's a process, and as you say, I think not that there's like some kind of wall or a magic number that you have to do, but to keep engaging the process and make it longer and longer and longer, right? So that you
Yes.
can have that separation between all of this craziness that is our daily lives, right?
Hmm.
And then this really fundamental, uh, quiet time that is for you, for your improvement cognitively, emotionally, and physically.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you said it, continuing the engagement. That's exactly it.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take another break. And then when we come back, I think we want to talk about one of the things you mentioned was how meditation can help with productivity at home and at work. Because I think that's what a lot of people want to know is how can I use this and be more productive, more efficient, or just more aware and open, right? And then you also mentioned how it can help with relationships. So we're going to explore that when we come back after a short break. Hello, and welcome back to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Sweet, and we have been talking everything Kundalini Yoga with C. McDermott. And we've been talking about the poses, the breath work, the different types of breath work that you can do, and some of the benefits of Kundalini Yoga. Now we're going to move on to how you can take the benefits of Kundalini Yoga and meditation and how that can help with focus and productivity at home and work. So how does this work? So you talk about like get up in the morning, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. We're going to do the breath work and the meditation. And how does that translate to helping a home life and work life? Because I think that's really what people want to know is what can this
Yeah.
do for me?
So it's 4 a.m., but
4
no,
a.m.
so there's an ambrosial hour that is often observed by Kundalini practitioners, and it's before the sun comes up. So a lot of Kundalini practitioners wake up between 4 and 6 and do their sadhana, but really sadhana can refer to any practice, so you don't need to do it first thing in the morning. And you should always sleep with your circadian rhythm. So if you're a morning person, then you can do it. But whatever fits into your schedule. Kundalini yoga it's a householder's yoga. So you're not supposed to be isolated from society. It's for everyday people that have families and jobs. And this was, why it was brought to the West. So the idea is that the early morning is really just a dedication, right? So you have a dedication to something, and that dedication can be anything. If you're just waking up and you're like, I do a gratitude practice every day. I like to walk my cat in Central Park, whatever the dedication is, it doesn't matter, like you have to have a dedication, right? So this is just the dedication path that I've chosen, but it does lead to enhanced productivity for many people that choose that as their daily practice. But yeah, again, any dedication, of course, but the sadhana can just be any daily practice at all. Sometimes it's only 3 minutes of breath of fire, and maybe that's all you need that day. But it's the nervous system regulation that allows you to then step into the world as a partner, a parent, a sibling, a child of an adult, whatever the circumstances. People often are caring for a lot of other people, whether they're caring for an older parent or they're caring for children or even, a spouse. Or they're in a job where they care for people, like say they're like a nurse or, something in any of those fields where you care for people. You are then taking the time for your own care, right? So I hate the term self-care because I know it feels like, wow, how do we monetize this? It's so crazy, but of course this is free. So Kundalini yoga is free. Your breath is free. You just have to take it. And really what it allows you to do, you'll find many entrepreneurs and many like kind of people, that are in like tech jobs or people, you'll find a lot of like Silicon Valley people are often in, and most of the people that I teach private lessons to or private classes rather, are all kind of like, yeah, busy people, right? They're not like yogis that are like, oh, I just cold plunge and go on plant medicine journeys. They're significant members of their community, and they like to get stuff done, right? So the speed at which the Kundalini technology works, as we call it, really appeals to those types of people, the people that want to, like kind of want to get it done, right? So you'll find that with that nervous system regulation, and then, you come to a meeting, you can kind of just have more of a stable self, and you're less reactive, say like in like the workplace, or you could just really kind of handle 16 things coming at you at once because you've trained your nervous system. I know it's made me a far more patient parent. And it's made me, a better spouse to my husband because, again, we practice together, but, both people don't need to practice. There just needs to be an awareness, of your, it'll give you some level of emotional resiliency and really just kind of keep in perspective your place in the planet, right? So maybe like the thing that feels really big 2 hours into meditation is not so big, and maybe it's just that 3-minute meditation day, and that's fine. But you'll find that you come out of that like maybe that thing wasn't as big of a deal as I thought, and it just keeps it just keeps perspective, right? It's easy to spiral in all of the information coming at us and really being super like hyper focused on our tiny little worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. So, I think that's part of it, right? So people start to get into meditation and they say, oh, but I can't focus. I got all this stuff running through my mind. That's exactly why you need to do meditation, is so that you can bring that down. So instead of being like a 10-lane superhighway going into Washington, D.C., you're more like, a couple of lane highway in the middle of Iowa or something, right? That's more like what's going on in the brain. And so what you're saying is that as you take like all that noise from the outside world and start to bring it down, calm it down, we calm the nervous system down, the breath work really enhances our mental clarity. It helps with, oxygenating the brain and making new connections and those kind of things. And as you say, we're working on the vagus nerve and our flight and fight system, which transferring that to the rest and recuperate system, right? That allows you then to have that space, right? Because we don't have that all going on in our head. And it really allows to bring in that calmness, right?
Mhm.
As you said, to the home, work. If you've got important decisions, you have that space now because you don't have that super highway running through with all of those crazy thoughts. You can say, okay, this is the decisions I have to make that are in front of me. And as you say, they seem to be less overwhelming because you've really calmed that system down.
Mhm.
So, you mentioned like kind of getting up in the morning. I know many of us are morning people. They may not believe it out there, but we've
Mhm.
looked at the genetic tests and we're here to tell you that most people are morning people and should be getting up at 6. And how can people start to incorporate this so that they can get all of these wonderful benefits? Where would we start?
Yeah, I mean, if you get on YouTube and because I mentioned it being free, of course, there are not a lot of Kundalini yoga studios out there, but it's not something that you would have to go to a studio for by any means. And it's something very simple you could do at home. So you could just hop on YouTube and find any practitioner that you enjoy talking, or I mean, sorry, listening to them speak. And yeah, just try out some short meditations and some practices. And then if you feel like maybe that's something that you want to take a little deeper, there's any number of more teacher-led classes that would be an investment, but there's some kind of all ranges of pricing. And then of course you could always hire a private yoga teacher, but Kundalini is tough to find teachers. I have a teacher that I've worked with for several years, and we have a group we've done on one-on-ones, and I've gone on retreat with her several times. And it's a really special relationship because we are both teachers, but it's such a unique perspective of the world that it's really nice to kind of find that group of people that you connect with in Kundalini. But if Kundalini is too intense and you try it on YouTube and you're like, not really for me, too much mantra, try out some of the breath work, because again, that you don't necessarily need to get into the mantra. You don't have to get into, the Sikh Dharma or anything along those lines. You could really just focus on strengthening your diaphragmatic breathing, right? So you can always utilize some of those practices, and it will likely take you down that spiritual path if that's something that you're looking for. But otherwise, it just might kind of pique your interest in actual just breath work. So, there's a whole other modality of breath work. There's holotropic breathing and there's circular breathing. And, I've done probably every type that we could. And it definitely takes you to another place. So, that done under the guidance of a teacher that, you would probably want to find someone recommended. But that can be done in person. That's probably like safer done in person.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that can be a really intense experience for some people. And it's, again, I wouldn't recommend that for everyone, but if it's something that you wanted to look into, it can be very transformative and it can be very rewarding. It can open up a lot too, so just be aware. But yeah, if it comes down to really just like wanting a little more space to breathe and a little more space in the rib cage, is check out anything to do with diaphragmatic breathing, and you'll probably find that your posture improves, your cognition improves, and then your productivity improves as a result.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? Kundalini not only incorporates the breath work, the meditation, there's a spiritual aspect to it too. And as you say, it's not for everyone, but they can find elements of these things that can be beneficial. So maybe it's just the meditation you start with, maybe it's just the breath work you start with. And I'm a big proponent of breath work and feel like that is something that people should look at. But again, obviously they have to consult physicians if they've got like underlying asthma or, other pulmonary problems. But if you're
Mhm.
healthy and you want to improve, breath will improve so many parts of your life. So yeah, again, focusing on that, I think is super important. And that was, again, one of the reasons that I wanted C to come on to the show and talk about Kundalini yoga, because it does incorporate so much of that breath work and how important that is to our bodies and our brains and also our spiritual lives. We didn't really talk about that a lot, but there is that aspect, and C has certainly alluded to it, that I think if you go down the Kundalini yoga road, certainly that will open up things for you. I know meditation does that too. The longer that you meditate, you can have things come to you in your mind, that new ideas and new inspirations and things like that. So it opens up a whole new world, and new friends too, it sounds like, if you get into someone with a studio or something like that. All right, so see if you can just again let people know where they can find you. Again, if you want to talk about some of the classes that you run. I think here we are at the end of the show.
Yeah. You can find me on cmcdermott.com. It's CEEMcdermott.com. And right now I'm not offering any group classes, a little packed schedule lately, but I do offer one-on-one private classes for individuals and couples, because actually I think couples are really fun to work with. And that's remote. So it's been really fun and really transformative. Yeah. So anywhere in the world.
Awesome. Now, one of the questions I ask guests at the end of every show is, what are you doing to intentionally thrive?
Ooh, yeah. I think it's my sadhana. Every day.
Every day. Just the continual practice of that, no matter what, right? It's non-negotiable.
It's really a lifestyle when it comes down to it, because the sadhana doesn't end at 5:40. It goes until the end of your time.
It's just kind of integrated with you now.
Right. It just continues, and it's just a way of life. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on to the show and giving us a window into Kundalini yoga and the breath work and all of the benefits that it can give our lives. And I just I appreciate you for letting us learn from you. And for those of you who are listening, go out and find what works for you. Meditation, breath work, and if it's Kundalini, great. Any of those will help immensely in your life in improving clarity, cognition, even your physical body. So with that, I really appreciate everybody for listening in, and I look forward to talking with you in a couple of weeks for another show. Thanks for listening to the Best Living Show. Thanks for listening to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachelle Sweet. Breathe, eat, sleep, thrive in every aspect of your life on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Tune in Thursdays at 6 p.m. to continue your new narrative and step into a new way of being. We are not what people have told us we are. We are so much more than that. I'm going to help you thrive and get the answers you desire, not only in the external world, but on the inside. For more information, go to drrachelsweet.com. That's drrachelsweet.com.